You are tuned in to a Fireside Chat with Zany Mystic. Join us now on another exciting metaphysical journey. Relax, tune in, drop out, and take a seat by the fire as we explore new realms and possibilities. This is Magenta Pixie. You can find me at magentapixie.weebly.com. But now, here is Zany Mystic and guest. Enjoy the show.
Greetings, everyone, and welcome to a Fireside Chat with Zany Mystic, otherwise known as your host here, Lance White. Before I introduce tonight's guest, I have a brief public service announcement. Yesterday, my Yahoo, Facebook, and blog passwords were phished, meaning stolen, and the hacker used instant messaging to contact all of my friends to ask for money, claiming to be me stuck in London. Unfortunately, a friend of mine on Facebook fell for the scam and wired $500 to the perpetrator. All of my account passwords were changed, so I have no access to any of my accounts at Yahoo or Facebook or on my blog. This can happen to anyone, so I recommend that those who are wise don't send money to people on the internet, especially anybody that claims to be a friend of yours. It could be a stolen identity. Also, don't do what I did and use the same password for all of your accounts. I've been using the same password for 10 years now, and I knew that someday it could blow up on me. Well, yesterday was the day. So I advise changing your password monthly and keep a list of them offline. Use a mix of numbers, caps, and lowercase. The longer and more complex, the better. People are getting into bank accounts and cleaning them out. So that said, you have all been duly warned. Okay, tonight I'm delighted to welcome CLIF High back for a special Halloween show. He doesn't really need an introduction, but for the one person listening who may not know, CLIF is best known for his work with the WebBot project at Half Past Human, and I believe that's www.halfpasthuman.com. He can correct me if that's wrong. First established to assist in analyzing market trends, it was soon noticed that other trends were beginning to reveal themselves in the nature of future events, which had been revealed through linguistic models. The WebBot project began and was affectionately referred to as the Rickety Time Machine. CLIF has been a guest on numerous shows recently, including Coast to Coast, Jeff Rense, and American Radio. So let's welcome him back to the show tonight, and happy Halloween, CLIF. How are you?
I'm doing just fine.
Well, it's your turn to talk. I've done my talking now.
Yeah, well, there you go. The website is correct. No problem there. And it's it's sort of strange to be here in a Halloween night doing this sort of thing, but hopefully we can provide enough scaries. I've got skeletons on halfpasthuman.com every day of the year, so get you in the mood for it.
And I put a special skeleton up on the bio, so, if that doesn't scare people away, I don't know what will. The first thing that most people are probably going to want me to ask is there was supposed to be an October surprise. How did that turn out?
There was supposed to be an October turn of language, and there
okay.
Indeed has been one,
okay.
And it reflects the change of events in this past week. If you just looked at the news following international crises in Afghanistan or the markets or any of that, you'll notice that all of the language being used in general refers to something that is stomach-grabbing in the sense of building tension language. So we were quite correct about that.
Mm-hmm.
Sadly, but apparently quite accurate, and it began with the swine flu pandemic announcement in the U.S., state of emergency, hospitals starting to be moved under government control. And then the next day we had the filing of bankruptcy of the largest commercial real estate lender that was operating in the U.S. And that one was also tied to GMAC, something that should not go unnoticed.
Interesting. Well, that was one of my questions, which I hadn't, which is a couple of questions down, is has the commercial real estate bubble begun to burst yet, which I believe you mentioned in the last report.
Yes, and it's going to fail, and it's going to fail very rapidly, because unlike the home situation, repossession is not normally an issue. You have to understand that a great deal of the soon-to-be bankrupt asset or worthless asset of commercial real estate is empty, and so there's no issue in terms of repossession. There's very little in the way of social impetus to keep it in anybody's hands in particular, so people can go bankrupt quite rapidly in that business, as we've seen, for instance, in the side failures of the S&L crisis of last century here in the southwest and southeast U.S.
Another interesting thing, I was reviewing the latest report that I received from you, and you're absolutely right on this one. I mean, you just spell it out in black and white. I've noticed that the chemtrails are showing up without the planes being obvious, and I reviewed the WebBot report, and it mentions that not only are they going to not be obvious, but they're going to increase in volume.
And that apparently is the case. We're seeing much more in the way of manifesting language on the net about that. People complaining that, their areas were especially hard hit this past summer.
Mm-hmm. And, of course, this has been going on for a good 10 years or longer.
With various levels of cover stories, correct.
Right. And as we know, it's not on the major news networks because they're controlled. And we only get probably, we get minimal information, if anything. I'd say most of the news is disinformation at this point.
Well, it's 100% propaganda. That's their function is to lie for the establishment, yes.
Yeah, exactly.
And they do their job very well. Look how many people are confused.
Absolutely. And if you're not confused enough, you can watch the commercials in between.
There you go.
Mind numb.
Right.
And so, yeah. It's been mentioned that people are afraid that let's get back to the swine flu because you brought that up. I have done enough research on this to satisfy my own curiosity, and I believe that was engineered, as are most horrific diseases, and the powers that be usually have the antidote or some method of avoiding being infected with their own
with their own weapons, basically, yeah.
Right, their weapons. I mean, basically, it seems as if the politics, the politicians, the military has turned on us, and we're now the enemy. Americans are the enemy of our own government that we're paying for.
Yeah, I don't think that they actually would award us that status. I think they see us more in the lines of sheep or cattle, in the sense of a giant, large mass that they can do with as they will. Because the enemy, the concept of an enemy, bear in mind you're talking to a radical linguist here, implies at least a certain amount of respect that that person or organization or whatever could do you harm. I don't think that they suspect that is the case, and they treat us very much like cattle. It's like, let's try this particular product or whatever. But bear in mind, they've been doing this since the 60s. So this is nothing new. And the fact that they got away with it in the 60s and 70s led to the attitude that has produced chemtrails and all this other stuff today.
Oh, yeah. And, of course, starting with 1947 and Area 51, most of the projects that the corporations have been working on secretly all went black.
Yeah.
And fund those. My understanding is that the elder Bush was the one that began the running of the drug trade from the cartels through one of the oil wells. They would load them up off the oil well.
The platforms. The
platforms.
Yeah.
And then they'd use that drug money to fund black operations.
Right.
In fact, one of my guests who you mentioned in your recent report, Andrew D. Bajago, was part of a project in the 60s called Pegasus, and he said that the project controller was, of all people, Donald Rumsfeld.
Well, who was also, of course, the head of marketing and other nefarious activities for Cyril, and he's responsible for aspartame being rammed through the Let's Make a Safe Product committees for the FDA, and which set off that whole level of neurotoxin, and they make a fortune on that because there's all the medicines to treat the associated problems. So it's quite complex, but nonetheless, that pretty much is how I understand it as well.
Yeah. It's just so strange to live in a world of such great duality, where everything that we see is designed to improve life and, eat these vitamins and go to this gym and do this and do that. And underneath it all, there's this dark agenda that goes way back to the shadow government and, the power.
Or you can trace it all the way back to John Dee, the original 007 agent for the Queen of England in the 1500s or earlier. You can trace it back to Pope Gregory ordering the faked destruction of the Mayan codices when they were smuggled back to the Vatican, and they were used to, alter the calendar. There's all kinds of weird plots going on with these people, and it's very odd indeed. Getting back to the idea that we're their enemy just for an instant.
Yes.
Our data actually shows that that is the case, and that they realize that, and but they don't see us as enemies as individuals. They see the herd breaking from their control as enemy because it, in essence, would be a stampede, an overwhelming force. And that I think they're very much afraid of. What they're afraid of it is within the language we can see, is a secondary kind of a thing. Some of the stuff coming out of Graham House or the Council on Foreign Relations here in the U.S. seems to imply through our archetype resolution process that their fear of the masses rising in a general political awakening is right up there, but there's something greater than that they're a little bit weirded out by. Nonetheless, their most immediate fear is revolution. And anytime you see the words used anywhere near politicians, blood drains right out of them in their eyes, go very narrow.
Well, they're pretty bloodless and
to begin with, you're right.
It's hard to tell when the blood drains out of them. They're all such vampires.
You're right. Perfect for the season, of course, yeah.
Of course. Another obvious truth to me and to so many people that are waking up around the globe is that free energy technology has existed for over 50 years, as has advanced travel and a second space program that we know very little about, except that it can go to any planets and it might have interdimensional capabilities. Is there any hint in the bot of this coming out in the open at any point? Because there's so much pressure from various exopolitics groups on the president. I believe Stephen Greer wrote The President, and
yeah, we have some support for we certainly have all kinds of support for the idea of the pressure being placed on politicians. We don't have any support for the politicians, quote, caving in and responding to that pressure in an affirmative way. We do have support for the information coming out, but only in the chaos of much larger events. So it's very much like revolution sweeping through France in the 1700s. 300,000 people get killed, and by the way, of that 300,000, there were like 15 or 20 really key players that were taken out, which set back Vatican moves for almost a century. But you don't know it until the whole drama has played out in almost 80 years after their revolution. We're going to be faced with something in a much more compressed time, but the data would suggest that in the chaos of other events, information will be released, but its propagation thereafter is not necessarily guaranteed to be as swift or available as we have now. In other words, the chaos of the circumstances will indeed also affect the ability for that communication to get out.
Yeah, that makes total sense to me. In other words, the chaos of these large events, which I interpret to be the powers that be pulling the rug out of the dollar in America, and the real estate bubble bursting, and you probably...
and global food riots, and local food riots here in the U.S., and food
oil
riots...
going up to sky high so people can't truck anything around, and... Correct.
Energy shortages and spotty electricity, so on, right. And see, that'll be part of the problem. Of course, we require electricity to, front the Internet. And so there's also a few key players in the telephone world that basically run the trunk upon which the Internet is based. Wow. And they will also be affected by circumstances beyond everyone's control. Unfortunately, at some point, the ability